This is the Easter Day message that was brought to All Saints Church on March the 31st, 2013 by Reverend Simon Martin. Unfortunately, the beginning of this message was not recorded, and so this introduction has been repeated. There are no experts when it comes to the resurrection. And resurrection takes us and leads us in some very difficult places. It challenges our thinking and it challenges our belief. Sandy Miller, the vicar of Holy Trinity Brompton in London, wrote a lovely little book called All I Want Is You. And in that little book he mentioned that there were two routes toward the Christian faith, two routes towards faith in Jesus. Either we can wait for understanding in order to believe, or we can decide to believe in order that we can begin to understand. I wonder in which category you recognize yourself. Waiting for understanding in order to believe, or deciding to believe in order that you can begin to understand. It's quite clear from the story of the resurrection that Thomas, now we know as Doubting Thomas, was certainly somebody who needed the evidence, who needed hard facts. Maybe we could say he was a scientist, and I appreciate his need and his desire to have facts. I'm a little bit like that myself. I know I need to have the information. I like to make up my mind first. I've got a strong mind. I wonder how many of you identify with Thomas in needing to touch and see Jesus in order to believe. There have been many moments in my life that have turned me upside down. Usually they've been accompanied with physical manifestations of stress like breathlessness or palpitations or stunned silence. And amongst all the other emotions, every time I'm challenged, every time there's a changing event in my life, I feel fear. Things like leaving my home country, or getting married, or having children, or being ordained to minister in the church, or preaching every Sunday. Fear is a significant part of our lives. It motivates us. Some fear is good. Some fear is a little bit too much of is not such a good thing. Fear is a very common human reaction to events that change our lives. And fear was definitely in the midst amongst the disciples as they encountered the resurrected Jesus. I'll talk about that more later on. When we put all four gospel accounts together, like reviewing the evidence of a cold case, we need to appreciate just what the event did for those whose lives it first changed. Jesus' closest friends, the disciples. I believe that we can be taken on a journey of discovery that leads us to the very heart of human reality and challenges us deeply. If we take all of this evidence together and if we remain open to the impact of and the sheer revolution it caused in them. Unfortunately, though, for us, it must, if we're honest, this event leads us to some very uncomfortable places and spaces and raises some questions which we really have to answer. Today I want to review four of these areas that the resurrection takes us towards. And you see, rather than the resurrection being good news in the sense of being easy news, I believe that understanding the resurrection leads us into these four areas that I'm going to talk about. Four significant challenges to us. You see, either the resurrection happened or it didn't. It's a whole lot easier to say that it didn't because it raises problems not many of us are really willing to face. And it's easier just to say that it didn't because we don't have to be challenged with the consequences and the results of believing and understanding. So many people who disregard the resurrection do so. They choose to call it a myth and discard it as wishful thinking and try and discredit the eyewitness accounts. But really, when we take the volume of evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And the sheer humanity of the eyewitness accounts that we see documented in the four Gospels. I believe there is not just enough evidence here to convince a strong mind that believing in a resurrected Jesus is a good idea, but there's enough heart and enough humanity in the story for us to believe their accounts in order to understand. You see, I believe the resurrection takes us into these four areas. It takes us somewhere entirely new. Secondly, it takes us into something completely uncontrollable. Thirdly, it takes us toward a new definition of significance. And fourthly, it takes us inward into deep self-examination. It takes us into something new because on the scale of all of human history, all of history that has ever been and will ever be, there was only ever one individual who made the claim that he would die, that he would be resurrected back to life, and then pulled it off. Only one individual, only one moment in all of history in which, unaided by human hand or in any other way that we can possibly see with science and technology that we have today, has there ever been one individual raised from the dead, source, first sealed in the tomb, and then raised from the dead by an act of God. This is something so vastly different from anything we can experience, anything that we can understand, anything that has ever been before. The resurrection takes us into that place to say, well, actually, we're in new territory now. We're in a new space. We're in a new understanding. My belief and my understanding kind of collide at this point to think, hang on a second, dead people don't rise again. Dead people don't come back to life. Dead people stay dead. In fact, the accounts in the Bible of Jesus' deadness, if you have it like that, was that a Roman soldier reported to his commander-in-chief that Jesus was dead. Somebody who had seen war and fighting and had probably killed a number of people at his own hand by his own sword, declared that Jesus was dead. I don't think you can get more dead than a Roman dead. And yet, they saw him again. There was evidence that Jesus was seen again. Shame. The people who were mourning the loss of their friend Jesus had some hallucinations. Their grief process wasn't working very well, and they just wished to see Jesus. So they thought they saw him. They recognized maybe somebody who looked like Jesus, and they thought, he's alive in all of us. He's passed by. He's in another realm, and we catch glimpses of him. No, the evidence was pure and simple that they saw him. They ate with him. They fed him food. They touched his wounds. Jesus was no longer dead. This is a very uncomfortable place for us as human beings to be. The realization that something supernatural, something spectacular, extraordinary had happened, and it calls us to acknowledge that this had happened and was real. Either it did or it didn't happen. The resurrection did or it didn't happen. Secondly, it takes us into something completely uncontrollable. I'm fascinated with two popular questions that always seem to be bouncing around those great institutions like our universities and our pubs. These two great questions: where do we come from, and are we alone? I think they've got to do with our deep-seated need for significance and control. You see, for many people, being human, one of the greatest characteristics of being human is that we can control our destiny. We can control our lives. We can control the world around us. And with science and technology and all these great skills that we have and equipment that we have, surely we can control our world. Well, if there's anything it's teaching us, that maybe the greenhouse problem is that we really can't control our world. But the resurrection does that par excellence. The resurrection makes us realize that we are out of control. When it comes to somebody being raised from the dead, we know nothing. There are no experts when it comes to resurrection. Nobody's done this before. Nobody has done it again. Nobody... You can't phone up and look in the yellow pages, resurrection expert. It's just so out of our comfort zone. It's out of our ability to control. It puts us on the back foot. So if we engage with the idea of the resurrection, if we begin to think it through logically and begin to entertain the idea of believing the resurrection of Jesus in our hearts, we need to step into the arena of being out of control, being in a space that is completely new, a space that is completely alien and foreign to us as human beings, and a space where we don't have control. Thirdly, I was meant to have a couple of pictures. There was the second picture. A lovely picture of John and Peter rushing to the empty tomb after they had heard the witness say that he is alive and the tomb was empty. They rush to see for themselves. Thirdly, if we really take the resurrection and the implications of the resurrection seriously, it brings us into a new definition of significance. We're in a society that is obsessed with celebrity and honour and fame, TV, the news, the media, finance companies, our politicians, our schools. They know how powerful and influential fame and celebrity is. It's in our airwaves. It's almost in the air that we breathe. Everything seems to be focused towards who said what and why and what's so-and-so doing and who's got the most power and influence. And we esteem and we put up on pedestals people of great power, great influence, great wealth, great intellect. And yet here in the gospel accounts of Jesus of Nazareth being raised to life, who is the person who in all four gospels is the first to witness, the most significant witness? It's Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene, from whom it was said in the previous accounts of the gospel, that she had 7 demons exorcised out of her. Now, I don't know what that means. Got no idea of what 7 demons being exorcised out of somebody really means, what she had or what she suffered from. But I can pretty much take a guess that she had some really significant mental illness. That she was a significantly disturbed person in her past. That she had lived a life of moral corruption and indecency to the point where society had kicked her out. She becomes the first and key witness to the greatest event in all history. If we engage with the resurrection, if we engage with this God who brings life out of death, if we engage with this out of control space that resurrection takes us into, we begin to realize that God's values are not our values. God values marginalized people. God reveals himself to marginalized people, to people on the outside, on the edge of respectability, of the poor, people in pain, minorities, poets, children. Eugene Peterson says, if we are to learn anything from the resurrection accounts, it is that we need to pay serious attention to the other voices in our society who are not celebrity, who are not intellectual, who are not the movers and shakers in our world. Because the people who are the most valuable to us in revealing resurrection life are people our society rejects. And finally, here's the last picture of the supper at Emmaus, the story of Jesus walking with 2 of the followers to Emmaus, and they don't recognize him. They don't know who he is until he breaks bread with them. Then their eyes are opened and they see him. What's really interesting, as I said before, was that throughout this story of the resurrection, the key emotional response, the key response to The witness of Jesus' resurrection is fear. Fear and bewilderment, astonishment, but still fear. Fear of being taken outside of the comfort zone. Fear of being in a completely new, completely uncontrollable and wholly transformative experience. They were afraid. And I don't blame them. As we used to say, I'd be bricking myself. There'd be this, in many ways immune, I've become immune to the idea of seeing a dead person walk around. Because I've been surrounded for 30 years, plus a few more, of the story of this Jesus who's been raised from the dead. I've almost been inoculated against the sheer impact of this story. But they were fearful. They were afraid. We're all afraid. I'm astounded at the things that make me afraid. Really silly things. Mice. What is it about spiders? Snakes. No, I mean, raised in South Africa, and where, if you're playing golf and the ball goes in the rough, you just leave it. You're like, I'm not going anywhere there. There's a rustle in the grass here, and I still get a trigger of adrenaline. Dogs. I have a dog, but I'm afraid of dogs. But silly things like people I don't know yet, or people who speak a foreign language, or when something I was expecting to happen doesn't happen, when the rules change, when the form or the shape of something I was expecting shifts and changes. I feel fear, let alone the idea of being involved in and being witness to the most remarkable event in all of human history. Fear, a natural initial response. But then Jesus speaks, the angels speak, and they bring peace. They say, don't worry, don't fear any longer. Welcome to the new world, where fear, although natural and normal, no longer dominates. There's a difference in being afraid and acknowledging your fear. But I think if we really engage with the resurrection, if we really take it to heart, if we allow the mind just for a moment to acknowledge that this may well be fact, this may well be something that did actually happen, that our hearts can begin to feel the feelings of what it might mean to engage with this Jesus who is resurrected, who is alive now, and invites us into this new reality. There's a difference in being afraid and acknowledging our fear. Things have changed, and they will stay changed forever. So I want to encourage us all this Easter time to just allow this story, this account of Easter once more, just to warm us and encourage us, to challenge us to see once again just how earth-shattering it really was. That God is part of it, that God is central to it, that the unknown has become known in Jesus. The greatest love that ever was reached down and spread his arms wide for us on the cross and took our sin and our penalty upon himself.